The next couple of hours are about television in the 1950s. We'll get you to television in a bit, but first, let's go from color to the black and white is beautiful 50s.
Old black magic has me in its spell. That old black magic that you weave so well.
Never know how much I love you. Never know how much I care. When you put your arms around me, I get a fever that's so hard to bear. Nothing but a hand
Fairy tales can come true. It can happen to you if you're young at heart.
Company store.
The night is bitter, the stars have lost their glitter, the winds grow colder, suddenly you're older, and all because of the man that got away.
They're not shining the stars as bright. They've stolen the joy from the night. Wish you were here. Wish you were here.
Wish I were there. Wish I were there. Sometimes I really wish I were there in those black and white 50s. But here I am in color in the 70s. And how to get back to the technology of TV in the 50s when television was young. Let's go backward through the looking glass of television. I say I'm Charles Kuralt, but really I'm not. I'm Kuralt recorded on tape. Honestly, right now I'm at home watching the taped Kuralt and looking at all these tape recorders. But there were no tape recorders in the early 50s. All these tape machines turn out to be villains in our unsentimental history of when TV was young. So, goodbye, tape machines. Leaving you. And goodbye to another thing, color. In the early 1950s, color was experimental, and commercial broadcasting in flesh tones didn't begin until later in the decade. So, goodbye, flesh tones. It's a black and white correspondent now. But I'm still coming in too clear. I'm a little too live. In those days, the best television was live, but the means for preserving it were very crude. What I'm looking for is this. It's called a kinescope recorder. What it is a film camera that takes a picture of a broadcast. Then the film goes into the laboratory, gets scratched a bit, and comes out like this black and white kinescope you're looking at now. So here I am, kinescoped, living in the technology of the early 50s. The picture's a lot deader, and the sound isn't as good. In technical terms, we've moved at least one generation away from the original. But But the 50s are a human generation away, too. And these corridors, these film vaults of those old kinescopes of the 50s stretch on and on. Thousands and thousands of hours of commercial network television of the 50s surround us. We could choose 1,000 paths through the past. We'll choose one when I come back. These are hundreds of thousands of hours of old kinescopes from the 50s. What we're going to do is restrict ourselves in general to live shows of that era and only occasionally look at old films. We're also going to restrict ourselves to network shows. To the thousands of people who worked in early television, from stars to toilers, this may not be the way you remember it. And we've left oh so much out, and there's been oh so much lost and thrown away. Because a television show has been thought of like a Kleenex. You use it for the eyes and then throw it away. Nobody knew television was going to be so big. In the 1950s, television grew faster than Americans. In the 1950s, I'll tell you how many Americans were produced. 40.5 million live births. 70 million television sets were produced in the same decade. If you've been watching television for 20 years and you're just an average viewer, you may have watched 27,000 hours of TV. Anybody who's looked at something for 27,000 hours is a pro. His eye understands far more than his tongue can tell. And that's you. So here we go, into the kinescopes, when you were either not born yet or were 25 years younger. And what was TV in its youth? It started as radio with pictures, or vaudeville with a camera photographing it. George Burns and Gracie Allen, just a vaudeville turn, photographed and recorded. As you'll see, they hadn't even figured out a way to keep the shadow of the microphone off George's face.
Stop. Gracie, how's your sister Bessie?
Bessie?
Yeah, the one with the scour on her neck.
Oh, the appendicitis. Oh, she's fine.
Gracie, appendicitis is on the stomach.
Yeah, I know, but she was so ticklish to
Up
have
there?
operated.
Music.
Oh, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dum. Ah, oh, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dum, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
Stop. How long is Bessie married?
17 years.
17 years.
They have 16 children.
Married 17 years and has 16 children?
Well, her husband was in the Army one year.
Music. Stop. 16 children, huh?
8 sets of twins.
8 sets of twins.
Well, you see, Bessie's husband makes bookends for a living, and it's affected their whole lives.
Music.
I'm going to finish the dishes. See you later, Fred.
Goodbye, Ginger.
CBS Television presents Sunday News with Edward P. Morgan.
Good afternoon. The latest news since you put down your Sunday paper spells violence from...
The first serious broadcasts done on television were news shows, and since we're newsmen, we thought we'd start there. This is how it was at the beginning, a picture of a correspondent saying words. We'll talk about the issues that gripped America in the 50s later on, but first, news broadcasting techniques. It's just a radio studio with a camera and a correspondent reading words. Just radio with pictures. But pictures demand movement, so the correspondent, Edward Morgan, makes a concession to motion. He gets up.
Shows likes to be forced to play host to a foreign power.
He goes to the other side of the desk. He continues to read the news.
The trouble is that it comes at such a dangerous time. and to London.
Radio plus still pictures came next.
Police estimate as to the number of cabs operating at noon today, 80%.
Douglas Edwards, the nightly CBS TV News. He does a kind of show and tell with some still photos that just happened to show up that evening.
And all right, in the same mood, we have some new pictures just received of Bonnie Prince Charlie, the future King of England. He's quite a growing boy now. Today he was 19 weeks old, I should have said. Looking very fine here, playing with his little bunny rabbit. And I would say that this perhaps is my favorite of Bonnie King Charlie to be of the United Kingdom.
When it came to film for news programs, there were problems right at the start. Camera crews cost a lot of money. It was cheaper to buy films from newsreel companies than to hire crews. And what television news producers really liked was an active film of troubles. Anytime there was a riot and a fight, it got on the news. Even if there wasn't much news value, a nice riot in an obscure place made good television.
Well, now we have some very, very dramatic pictures made by Telenews on recent Atlantic-packed riots up in Iceland. These are scenes of communist demonstrators as they battled police at Parliament Square.
The sounds you hear of crowds roaring are being added live by a radio sound effects man in the same studio with Doug Edwards. The newsreel tradition also demanded that colorful music be added to make the stories exciting. Doug Edwards is about to introduce a story from the Orient, and so somebody jockeying discs in the news studio put up a record recalling Fu Manchu.
From China, films of the national government delegates leaving for peace negotiations with the communists up in Beiping, former Minister of the Interior. And this is the Vice Chief of Staff of National Defense, the Minister of Justice.
And how did the anchorman know who these people were? Because the newsreels that took this film didn't send correspondents with their cameramen. Well, the standard practice was the man taking the pictures would ask somebody near him, hey, who are those guys? So often, the names of the people came back all wrong.
Australia. A British newsman reports that romance...
There's an even cheaper way to get film, and that's to accept a government handout. The Defense Department always had a lot of film they were anxious to have Americans see. In the middle of the Cold War, you'd often get handouts like this, with picture and information supplied by the government. Here's unchecked propaganda disguised as news.
From the Air Force today, first film of an historic non-stop flight to the North Pole and back.
At Loring Air Force Base in Maine, the B-52 pilots are briefed on their mission to show the world in time of crisis the power of the Air Force. Destination, the North Pole, hitting a mythical target en route, then fly back non-stop to strategic air command bases in the United States. The families wait out the long hours. It's the longest non-stop flight in jet history. They've flown non-stop up to 17,000 miles, up to 32 hours in the air, and proved that the Air Force can deliver nuclear bombs anywhere.
The government's ideas, the government's film. Early television almost died a borning. TV news was unsuccessful compared to radio. In 1951, there were fewer news broadcasts on television than in 1948. In the early days of the Cold War, the TV networks didn't have enough money to send newsmen abroad, and the Russians kept the few American correspondents in Moscow on a tight rein. So clips like this made primetime newscasts.
Just back from Russia, Mrs. Pearl Mester is greeted by her good friend Margaret Truman, and the former Luxembourg minister brought back some very vivid impressions.
I've been asked many times about the standard of living in Russia compared with America. Naturally, the standard here is far, far superior to anything in Russia. They have 4 and 5 families living in 2 or 3 rooms, and you know, here in America, how we live.
In a short time, just a couple of years, vaudevillians like Burns and Allen were matched by the first generation of TV song and dance men, Art Carney and Jackie Gleason in their salad days.
We'll be traveling side by side like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
just a wonderful friendship this is. You're my pal. You're a tonic for my morale. As we paddle up life's canal, it's guys like you who make it swell. I think you're really great, and with Norton you'll always rate. Besides, I know you're influential. You carry lots of weight, lots of weight, lots of weight, lots of weight. Like a fellow in the gym needs a brother, and like a baby in the crib needs a mother. Everybody seems to need one another. Another gem. You can have my hat, my friend. My coat, my gun. My hat, my bag. My vote, my gum. Anytime you find you're up a tree, I tell you, future's always tough on me.
Meet your babysitter.
Say, kids, what time is it? Oh, well, howdy doody, kids. Stand by for Captain Video and his Video Rangers.
If you grew up in the 50s, and 40 million of you did, these are the kinds of shows that took care of the afternoon hours. In the 1950s, television came to dominate the non-sleep, non-school time of the American child. It still does. TV is probably the greatest source of common experience in the lives of kids, along with homes and schools. From the beginning, kids' shows have been praised for educating and damned for teaching the wrong things. The very earliest kids' shows were just 1930 westerns, bought by the pound, and full of the violence that an earlier generation had seen every Saturday afternoon at the local movie house. The prints were so scratched, they looked as if they'd been filmed in the rain. From the beginning, there was the constant worry of parents that kids would learn violence from TV. And that argument always gets coupled with the argument that there's something, well, wrong about playing commercials right at kids, making them make their parents buy something nobody needs. Both debates still go on.
Every ring is bright, colorful, and there are 16 different rings, 16 different pictures. Movie stars, sports stars, cowboys, Indians, jet planes, and giant passenger planes. Trade them with your friends. Collect all 16 rings.
But there's something else that has to be said, that television is the most powerful tool to teach youngsters that has ever been devised. When children's shows moved from old cheap films to new cheap studio shows, the producers begged you to use imagination for the budget they didn't have.
All aboard. Whoops, tunnel coming up. Everybody duck way down.
We're not going to show you much of these old shows. Why betray memory? Your imagination is brighter than these old kinescopes.
Coming into my hometown, Imagination Town, and here we are. Tom Corbett, Space Cadet.
Here was Mother Goose for the eye, your voyage to the outer reaches of your mind. And when you look at this Space Cadet, try to remember that you took things like this seriously.
You Earthlings, you are very clever.
Sure, we know how, Manning.
It never once occurred to me that you would discover our weakness. I underestimated you, sadly. Without the use of my photo lens, I am helpless. And at your mercy.
Look, his face. Why, he's just like us.
Good morning, Captain. Only one children's studio show has made it across 22 years of broadcasting. Captain Kangaroo started in the mid-50s, and he's still here. On this very first broadcast, Captain Kangaroo told us how he got his name.
So, my name is Kangaroo. Kangaroo, Captain Kangaroo. Eh? Captain. Right there. I'm the keeper here of the treasure house. Why do they call me Kangaroo? Well, that's pretty easy to see. Look at this right here, you see? See the great big pockets I've got? Look at them. Just loaded down. That's why, because I got pockets like a kangaroo.
In 1954, ABC and Walt Disney made a deal which altered children's programs forever. Unlike studio shows which could be shown just once, Disney films could be sold over and over again. Animation like this cost about $10,000 a minute, even in the 1950s. But these films, which are still being run, recovered their cost many times over.
Forever let us hold our banner high.
From the very beginning, there was one that went beyond the children. Kukla, Fran, and Ollie somehow touched everybody.
You remember that old Dragon Tooth ballet I brought over to you? Yeah, let's try it. I'll show you, Kukla. Just watch very carefully. You could try it, too.
No, I don't have the same kind of tooth.
Try it with your nose.
Let's see, how would that work? Try it. Give it to me, Billy.
You have a very elastic nose.
Well, I would prefer to call it resilient.
Indeed. We might work out a whole new thing. Let's try that again. My gracious.
Stop it! Somebody stop it!
Kukla, I think we have a whole new art form coming up.
Three little maids from school are we, birds in the middle will they be, filled to the brim with girlish glee. Three little maids from school, everything is a source of fun. Nobody takes what we care for now. Life is a joke that is just begun. Three little maids from school. Three little maids who are unwary, come from a lady's seminary. Three from a genius to marry. Three little maids from school. Three little maids from school.
Wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with your set. The soundtrack from this kinescope has been lost. It's sad. Sinatra, Hope, and Crosby, an expensive variety show, mid-50s. All those important performers, and the soundtrack has disappeared forever. But that's not the only trouble with this show. The biggest error is in the commercial coming up. Television, which became the world's largest and biggest salesman, just couldn't sell this product. The Edsel was the result of extensive marketing research, innumerable computer printouts, and the keenest advertising money could buy. Everything was right about it, except that Americans wouldn't buy it or touch the teletouch. It's very rare that television had an advertising failure this large. Here's how successful TV became. In 1950, just less than 1 out of 10 American homes had a TV set. In 1955, 6 homes out of 10 had sets. In 1960, almost 9 out of 10 homes had sets. TV became big business. In 1949, all stations and networks lost $25 million. By 1955, television made $150 million. By 1960, broadcast income before taxes was over $240 million. In 1950, advertisers spent $171 million on TV. By 1955, advertisers were spending well over $1 billion a year. By 1960, they were shelling out over $1.6 billion. So this history of TV has as much to do with money as with talent. And with that much money, you could buy the best talent, like one of Milton Berle's most famous nightclub acts. The comedy of the 50s is not the same as the comedy of the 70s. Today's best comedy shows are satirical. They're about social or racial or ethnic problems. The comedy of the 50s was about nothing, as you can clearly see. Some people say that in the age of McCarthy, comedians were afraid to satirize the society they lived in. Other reasons for mindless comedy. The safest, fastest, and funniest way to mount a TV laugh show in the 50s was to buy a clown and let him perform.
Oh, no, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. Right now. And here comes Silky Soda now.
All great clowns have a tragic side to them. The sad side of clowning is that sooner or later, given the week-after-week demands of television, the funny men would run out of material. And the clowns would kill themselves off because they gave away too much too soon.
That's funny. This wine seems to have lost something.
Yes, it did. No, it didn't.
How soon do you think it will be before the poison will take effect?
In 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3.
When the clowns ran out, comedy moved. It went from performer to writer, from stand-up comic to situation comedy, from the East Coast to the West Coast. But yesterday, today, and tomorrow, there'll always be the queen of clowns, Lucy.
Poverina, e che crede di pigliar la paga senza far nulla? Andiamo, lavora! Au! E che te credi?
Hello, San Francisco. This is Ed Murrow in New York. Just stand by. We'll be with you in about 90 seconds from now.
On November 18th, 1951, the most important event in the history of network commercial broadcasting took place. It happened on a program featuring correspondent Edward R. Murrow called See It Now. And at that time, nobody quite understood its importance.
See It Now, a document for television.
What had happened was that the Long Lines Division of American Telephone and Telegraph had gotten together a network of cables and relays which tied the East Coast to the West Coast. It sounds like nothing today. But it was like, well, say the first pictures from the moon, the first pictures from Mars, live pictures, live from coast to coast. And Ed Murrow played with it like a toy.
We are, as newcomers to this medium, rather impressed by the whole thing. Impressed, for example, that I can turn to Don Hewitt here and say, Don, will you push a button and bring in the Atlantic coast? There you have the East Coast of the United States.
And so the Atlantic coast showed up on the right screen. And a few moments later, the Pacific coast on the left screen. Downtown Manhattan.
There she is. Brooklyn Bridge. Thank you very much.
And then, in San Francisco, the Golden Gate. Alcatraz.
That's fine. Excellent. Hold it, please.
Telegraph Hill. It's nothing today, but it was everything then, particularly for commercial broadcasters. What Ed Murrow didn't realize at the time was that now an advertiser could at the same moment reach a national market in living rooms from coast to coast. The shaky pictures meant that a multi-billion-dollar industry was about to come into being.
Okay. Now, San Francisco, could you use what you call, I think, a zoom-R lens and close in on the bridge a little? Roger.
And at the end of the Bridging of America, Murrow, who had been used to radio and the spoken word, said about pictorial journalism,
"We, for our part, are considerably impressed. For the first time, man has been able to sit at home and look at two oceans at the same time. We're impressed with the importance of this medium. We shall hope to learn to use it and not to abuse it."
What was concerning America from coast to coast in that November of 1951 was ending the war in Asia, the Korean War, and the threat of communism at home. It's tempting to draw a parallel between the Korean War and the Vietnamese War, but they were two different wars on TV. Until that time in 1951, there were no physical facilities for coast-to-coast broadcasting. The national consensus about Korea had been shaped by print and radio news. Analytic films of the war came a few years later.
In Korea, bewilderment, retreat. At home, apathy, or at best, fear that Korea would begin World War III.
The terrible facts about Korea, unlike Vietnam, didn't get on the home screens until 5 years later. 2/3 as many Americans died in action in Korea as in Vietnam, even though the shooting phase in Korea was 1/3 as long as the shooting phase in Vietnam. In the cold decade of the 1950s in the American mind, there was the feeling the Russians were not only trying to throw us and democracy out of Asia, but that they wanted us out of Europe, too. Here's an analysis from the mid-50s.
The mind of Russia was fixed on a red Czechoslovakia, a red Romania, a red Hungary, a red Bulgaria, a red Poland, a red Yugoslavia and Albania for Soviet protection.
At the time of Korea, the majority of Americans thought we were already in World War III. Almost 70% of Americans expected the Russians to drop a hydrogen bomb on us. There was no doubt in the American mind that we faced an external threat from communists. The question was there an internal threat from communists? Were there subversives at work inside America? Were there communists undermining American television? Molly Goldberg, a Jewish mother way in advance of today's ethnic series. The typical Jewish mother 20 years before Portnoy complained.
Maybe he shouldn't have any more noodle pudding. Hey,
Molly, will you come in and sit on the table already? Because your cousin's conversation is getting beyond my endurance.
why, Jake, you promised.
The man speaking is Philip Loeb, an accomplished Broadway actor. Jake Goldberg was his first and last role on television. In the eyes of some people, Loeb was either a communist or belonged to a communist front. Molly, who also owned the show, was put under pressure by the sponsor to drop Philip Loeb. He lasted for almost 2 years after this broadcast, but he was finally dropped. For the next 4 years, no sponsor, agency, or network would touch Philip Loeb. He couldn't work. Later, he killed himself.
You're talking so loud, Pa.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the dancing feet of Paul Draper.
In 1950, Ed Sullivan booked Paul Draper, even though Sullivan knew that Draper was politically controversial. That's the term people used. Draper's career on American television was over. Somebody had said Draper was a communist. 3 days later, Sullivan publicly apologized for, quote, offending people instead of entertaining them, end quote. Blacklisting was in full force. It was thought that somehow people associated with certain causes could, in one manner or another, put communism into American television broadcasts.
From now on, Harry Morton will be played by John Brown.
George Burns was in no trouble, but when he cast a certain John Brown into the Burns and Allen show, he was told that Mr. Brown was red. Brown didn't play the part very long. In June of 1950, a certain secret list of supposed communist sympathizers was being circulated on Madison Avenue.
The money found it, but she always finds it, so will you hold this 20 for me?
The list was Red Channels. It was distributed to 4,000 key people in broadcasting and advertising. Its unstated purpose was to scare executives. It did. If your name was in Red Channels, you were professionally dead for years. Red Channels was published by American Business Consultants, originally a group of ex-FBI men. They had compiled lists of people in broadcasting who had taken political stances that they thought might be dangerous to the country. People in broadcasting were put on this list, quote, regardless of whether they actually believe in or even recognize the cause advanced, to discourage actors and artists from naively lending their names to communist organizations or causes in the future, end quote. There was no doubt that some of the people listed in Red Channels had been more than sympathetic to these causes. But Red Channels made political affiliation a professional crime with a sentence of banishment. This 1949 Studio One was based on a story by Dashiell Hammett, who had written great movies and books. Hammett and his works were blacklisted. For years, no one touched a Hammett property. Writers, of course, could use names other than their own or borrow them. Jeremy Daniel was a real person who lent his name to Abe Polonsky. Polonsky had been blacklisted. Daniel acted as a front and passed on the writer's fee. And this You Are There, also from 1953, was not written by the name you're about to see. The writing credit was taken by Leslie Sloat, a press agent and a front, who passed the fee on to the blacklisted Walter Bernstein. Writers could get away with fronts. Actors couldn't. Red Channels alleged that a writer named Alan Sloan was a communist sympathizer. In those fearful days, the name of Everett Sloan, an actor who appeared on this Studio One, was confused with writer Alan Sloan. Everett Sloan had trouble getting work.
The most beautiful woman. She was one of the finest women who ever lived. It was her misfortune to marry an owner of vast enterprises, a merchant prince.
This fine actor even got a clearance from the FBI, but the blacklisting people told him the FBI was too lenient. He remained under suspicion for years, a case of mistaken identity that harmed an actor's career.
But being also of a bookish turn of mind and not much interested in business...
Then there was the case of Lucille Ball. She had registered to vote communist when she was in her mid-20s during the Depression, but Miss Ball never voted communist. And since she was a great star, Philip Morris said they'd stand by her. They did. Her career flourished.
And now, suspense.
There was a double edge to this anti-communism. It happened when sponsors who should have concerned themselves with just good advertising got into the unaccustomed role of news and public affairs. This 1951 suspense program purported to tell a true story of underground anti-communism in Czechoslovakia, and the hero was a real organization called Radio Free Europe.
This is Radio Free Europe, the voice of free Czechoslovakia, bringing from our station in Munich messages of hope to our fellow Czechoslovakians imprisoned in their homeland behind the Iron Curtain. Tonight, we're going to speak especially...
These days, this is what we'd call a documentary drama. It told of a real event, people behind the Iron Curtain who received instructions on how to fight against communists from the Munich transmitter of Radio Free Europe. The drama continued its murky way to the midbreak and commercial. At that point, the president of the company, who perhaps didn't know he was being deceived by the CIA, introduced General Lucius Clay.
To present General Lucius D. Clay.
Well, it was last year's crusade that built the powerful Munich radio station of Radio Free Europe.
That's simply not true. Radio Free Europe's transmitter had been built by CIA money, not the money from public contribution. Radio Free Europe later confirmed that fact. But at this time in the Cold War, the CIA wanted a cover story for Radio Free Europe, and it tricked businessmen and public figures into a money-raising drive called Crusade for Freedom, which never funded more than a small part of Radio Free Europe. In a burst of public service, the sponsor gave up his commercial, and General Clay put in a plug for the Crusade for Freedom.
That is what the Crusade for Freedom is now doing, in a voice which each day penetrates deeper through the Iron Curtain.
What had been penetrated by the CIA was network television.
Gentlemen, you can join the 1951 Crusade for Freedom by sending your contribution, large or small, to General Lucius D. Clay. Remember, you can help fight communism by joining the Crusade for Freedom.
Good evening. Tonight, See It Now devotes its entire half hour to a report on Senator Joseph R. McCarthy, told mainly in his own words and pictures.
One of those documents was never supposed to have seen the light of day. Rather interesting it is. This is the document that shows that Alger Hiss and
the man with the biggest list of all was the junior senator from Wisconsin, Joseph R. McCarthy. In March 1954, Ed Murrow took him on, but a half hour of prime time was not enough. Joseph McCarthy was in full voice 3 years after the United States had been united by coaxial television cable. But McCarthy was not greatly interested in the alleged communists in television. He thought the United States was in peril of internal subversion because the whole government was soft on communism. He truly believed the internal peril was there, and he seemed to believe that any means were justified to root out the communists in our midst.
And wait till you hear the bleeding hearts scream and cry about our methods of trying to drag the truth from those who know or should know. But they say, oh, it's all right to uncover them, but don't get rough doing it, McCarthy.
Joseph McCarthy was not brought up on television, but he would be brought down by it. At 9:30 Eastern Standard Time in the early 50s, the legitimate theater and television discovered they were not made for each other. At 9:30 Eastern, a generation ago, the greatest musical star of the Broadway theater, Mary Martin, and the greatest musical star of the British theater, Noel Coward, tried to bring their refined, exquisitely honed talents to this brawling, hungry infant, live television.
They're tuning up.
I know the idea. I could hear them.
But how do you feel?
Terrible.
Oh, good.
It was all lovely, but Broadway wasn't going to work on TV. It took years to develop an act, and television gave it all away in minutes. Noel Coward and Mary Martin knew exactly why they were going to fail.
90 minutes is a long, long time. A long, long time. A long, long time. To make people laugh for an hour and a half in this very exacting medium.
There's a lot to
you expect, and the final effect may be nothing but tears and tedium.
Don't imagine that we've not rehearsed. We did that first, but fear no worse. We hope to amuse the customers with music and with rhyme, but 90 minutes is a long, long time. 90 minutes is a long
Mary Martin and Noel Coward.
In the 1950s, the bigger the show, the bigger the number of curtains. This is going to be a 3-curtain show. Listen closely now. The English language will never come at you any faster.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to sing you a song that I wrote long ago and far away. The name of it is Mad Dogs and Englishmen. In tropical climes, there are certain times of day when all the citizens retired tear their clothes off and perspire. You know, it's one of those rules that the greatest fools obey because the sun is far too sultry and one must avoid the poultry's little rain. Pat like a pat like a pat like a boo. That's natives if you're interested. The natives grieve when the white men leave their huts because they're obviously, definitely nuts. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. The Japanese don't care. The Chinese wouldn't dare to. Hindus and Argentines sleep firmly from 12 to 1, but Englishmen detest a siesta. You know, in the Philippines, they have lovely screens to protect you from the glare. In the Malay states, there are hats like plates, which the Britishers won't wear. At 12 noon, the natives swoon and no further work is done. But mad dogs and Englishmen go out to the midday sun. Oh, it's such a surprise for the Eastern eyes to see that though the English are effete, they're quite impervious to heat. When the white man rides, every native hides in glee, because the simple creature's hope he will impale his solar topee on the tree. Inhabiting hearts, sane natives, pay no attention. It's a shame when the English claim the earth that they give rise to such hilarity and mirth. Oh dear. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out to the midday sun. The smallest Malay rabbit deplores this foolish habit in Hong Kong. They strike a gong and fire off an noonday gun to reprimand each inmate who's in late. In the jungle town where the sun beats down to the rage of man and beast, the English garb of the English South merely gets a bit more creased. In Bangkok, at 12 o'clock, they foam at the mouth and run. But mad dogs and Englishmen go out to the midday sun. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out to the midday sun. The toughest Burmese bandit can never understand it. The heat of noon is just what the natives shun. They put their scotch or rye down and lie down. In the jungle swamps where the python romps, there is peace from 12 till 2. Even caribous lie around and snooze. There's nothing else to do. In Bengal, to move at all is seldom, if ever, done. But mad dogs and Englishmen go out to the midday, 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 out to the midday.
If the legitimate theater was going to be only a rare event on TV, there was an illegitimate theater that was going to provide days of drama. Government, politics, and television. The Army McCarthy hearings of 1954 made the best show of the year.
Gentlemen, will you please take your place?
Like the Watergate hearings of this decade, the Army McCarthy hearings, which went on for 36 days, provided 20 million American viewers with heroes and villains. There was the Secretary of the Army, Stevens, who, while earnest and honest, like many a television hero, would not catch the public's fancy. There was the indignant senator from Arkansas, McClellan, and in the background, young Robert Kennedy, and neither of them would catch the public's eye. Roy Cohn, McCarthy's smart young lawyer from New York. The public couldn't make up its mind about him. Welch, the Army's lawyer from Boston, and you'll see what happened to him.
And you, of course, understood you...
Most of all, there was Joe McCarthy, who was leading the fight against communists in the American government. This was not a fight of left against right, conservative against liberal. This was a war among anti-communist conservatives.
Filed here by Mr. Stevens and Mr. Adams.
McCarthy was taking on the Army in the person of the Secretary of the Army, Robert Stevens. That didn't daunt McCarthy. He always went for the jugular. And the American people hadn't 90 minutes as a long, long time, but 160 hours to judge whether this man was fit to lead the fight against communists, if there were any, in the government.
You're the Secretary of the Army. You have indicated a number of times that you're interested in removing communists.
Correct.
And you and I have had a sizable number of discussions about that, most of them in a completely pleasant vein. Is that right?
I wouldn't say a sizable number, no. Some.
We had some anyway.
Yes.
Right. Now, do you agree with me that if you find communists in the military as of a certain date, that it's a fair assumption that they are still there unless it can be shown that they have been removed? Is that a fair assumption, Mr. Secretary?
That they're still there? No, it's not a fair assumption.
Now, Mr. Secretary, here's the testimony of Mr. Browder, and I take this from a report it's dated, let's see, just a minute.
Does this mean I'm a communist, Senator?
That's awfully funny, isn't it, Mr. Secretary? That's terribly funny.
Chair suggests that we proceed in order.
I am asking you, Mr. Secretary, not about any communist activities on your part. I know of none. I doubt very much they would accept you as a member. I doubt that very much. I made it very clear to you at all times that I felt that you were anti-communist. I've also made it very clear to you that I thought that you were very naively and unintelligently anti-communist. You know that, Mr. Secretary. And you understand that we have not been making any attack upon the Army. It's upon those who belong to the communist conspiracy who have infiltrated into the Army. And it's no fun. I'm sure you'll agree, Mr. Let me ask you this.
You speak as if you're the only one who's interested in getting these people out.
After the first couple of weeks of viewing, ratings began to mount steadily. The majority of sets in use was tuned to these complicated and intricate hearings.
That came out from
law, government, politics, all gave way to this new kind of non-fictional form.
About this in April. I don't know if Mr. Brownell knew about it.
Who were the good guys? Who were the bad guys?
Or April. No, I didn't. Or May. Sir, I never. Or May. I never went near him, sir. Or June. The answer is never. Right. Or July. He communicated. Or July. No, sir.
Never would seem to cover July, I think.
ABC and Dumont were getting 64% shares of the audience. NBC and CBS ran hour summaries each night. And slowly, the American people turned against McCarthy. He faded before their eyes. There was something wrong about him. Nothing wrong with anti-communism. Something wrong with Senator McCarthy. All great dramas have an inevitable scene, a scene where great forces collide head-on. We've abstracted 4 minutes from one day in June. McCarthy, infuriated by Welch's treatment of young Cohn, McCarthy lifted out a document from the distant past which accused a young conservative lawyer in Welch's firm of belonging to a group of lawyers who had defended unpopular causes.
I certainly assume that Mr. Welch did not know of this young man at the time he recommended him as the assistant counsel for this committee. But he has such terror and such a great desire to know where anyone is located who may be serving the communist cause, Mr. Welch, and I thought we should just call to your attention the fact that you're Mr. Fisher, who is still in your law firm today, whom you asked to have down here looking over the secret and classified material, is a member of an organization not named by me.
Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness. Fred Fisher is a young man who went to the Harvard Law School and came into my firm and is starting what looks to be a brilliant career with us. Little did I dream you could be so reckless and so cruel as to do an injury to that lad. It is true he is still with Hale and Dorr. It is true that he will continue to be with Hale and Dorr. It is, I regret to say, equally true that I fear he shall always bear a scar needlessly inflicted by you. If it were in my power to forgive you for your reckless cruelty, I would do so.
I just give this man's record, and I want to say, Mr. Welch, that it has been labeled long before he became a member, as early as 1944.
Senator, may we not drop this? We know he belonged to the Lawyers Guild. And Mr. Cohn nods his head at me. I did you, I think, no personal injury, Mr. Cohn. No.
I have reason to believe that you did not know about his communist front record at the time you recommended it.
Mr. McCarthy, I will not discuss this further with you. You have sat within 6 feet of me and could have asked me about Fred Fisher. You have seen fit to bring it out, and if there is a God in heaven, it will do neither you nor your cause any good. I will not discuss it further. I will not ask Mr. Cohn any more witnesses. You, Mr. Chairman, may, if you will, call the next witness.
Are there any questions to come from the members of the church?
Television brought down Joseph McCarthy. His public career didn't end at the end of these hearings, but several months after these scenes, the United States Senate voted to censure him. His health failed. He died. Anti-communism continued without him. As we've said, the great comedians of the 1950s didn't touch social or controversial issues. What they did was work better and better about less and less, until finally they did nothing perfectly.
Evening News at 11 on TV8.
Winners and losers, some who won forever, some who lost forever. Gleanings from television in the 50s.
A number of events have made it evident that General MacArthur did not agree with that policy. I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy.
That old soldiers never die. They just fade away.
A fellow townsman of ours used to tell Abraham Lincoln. He said he felt like a little boy who had stubbed his toe in the dark. That he was too old to cry, but it hurt too much to laugh. great ones of the earth could not hear the cry. For they could not understand how a God could be greater than a man.
Mr. Halley, all due respect to the sandwich article, an awful lot of respect for it. I'm not going to answer another question. You just said I'm not under arrest and I'm going to walk out.
What I need mainly is three things in life. Possibly four. To be out of jail, to eat regular, to get what I write printed, and then a little love at home and a little outside.
When you get really pooped and you want something to pick you up, you get yourself a cup of tea.
Whenever I hear this passage, I'm always filled with wonder and respect for the way Brahms makes everything in his music out of something else in his music. It's all part of one great thought, and every single part is a branch of the same great tree. Listen to this section.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash. Wherever you are.
To most people, television is just entertainment. But to the federal government, television is a regulated industry. In the late 1950s, American broadcasters had to answer some embarrassing questions put to them by a congressional committee. The most popular form of television programming in those days was the quiz show. 24 quiz shows were on in one season alone. Millions of people watched millions of dollars given away to ordinary people who seemed to have extraordinary knowledge. Well, it turned out that many of those quiz shows were rigged. People had cheated, although who did the cheating has never been made very clear. Most of the quiz shows were owned and produced by packagers who made programs and sold them to the networks. But somehow it was felt the networks had something to do with the cheating, too. In the late 50s, Dr. Frank Stanton, then president of CBS, threw all the quiz shows off his network. The question to him is, when did CBS first realize there were rigged quiz programs on the network, and what did you do about it?
Well, the first tangible evidence we had was early in August of 1958, and within a week of the charges, we took the program off the air.
Dr. Stanton, do you think it is possible to put on quiz programs that are not rigged or that are free from any possibility of rigging?
In the action we announced back in October, we did not think it was possible to put on quiz programs with big money stakes and lavish prizes where you weren't running the risk of the possibility of rigging.
How were the quiz shows rigged? Well, there were lots of quiz shows, and they were all handled differently. But in sworn testimony, the story of the rigging came out. Let's have a look at some shows and see how they were fudged. Every quiz show purported to hold the questions secret, some locked up in bank vaults by respected members of the community.
From this point on, all questions come from locked vaults and manufactured trust companies. Manufactured trust company certifies that only authorized members of the bank have the keys and combinations of the vault. No members of the production staff of this program have the keys and combinations of the vault. And except for the editors...
The editors testified before a congressional committee that if they wanted to know what the questions were, they just went in and got them. Quoting from a sworn deposition.
I had a key to the safe, and I and my assistant would go in to get the questions.
Question: was a full series of questions generally kept in the bank?
Answer: not a full series.
Question: one of the purposes of the bank was to give the impression that it was impossible for the contestant to get advance help of any kind?
Answer: yes.
Question: was this a false impression?
Answer: yes.
So this bank official, who didn't know how it was done, was simply misled when he said,
"No one has seen these questions. Not Mr. March, not even I."
Gentlemen, your next question.
But why would the producers and editors want the questions? Well, to give the answers beforehand to the contestants. Somebody up there made very strong hints about which contestant he would like to see win or lose, and somebody in middle management would take the hint as law. Look, here comes a very hard question to a contestant, even a contestant specialized in knowledge of the theater.
Romance plays a major part in countless plays. I will name the feminine member of a romantic team from 2 different American plays. For $4,000 in each case, first, name the play from which the character comes, and then name the male half of this theatrical romance. The first character is Patty O'Neill, and the second character is Maggie Cutler.
The contestant is Wilton Springer, who submitted the following statement to the House Investigating Committee. It reads in part, "About 1 or 2 hours prior to my appearance on the program, I had a meeting with a producer in a dressing room. To some of the questions she asked me, I knew the answers. If I didn't know the answer, she supplied the answer." Here's one of the answers he was given.
That would be the man who came to dinner.
Name the male half of this theater romance.
That's Bert Jefferson.
You're right, and still champion. Come on out.
The man going into the glass booth is Xavier Cugat, the band leader. The woman is Lillian Roth, the singer. Somebody wanted Miss Roth to lose and Cugat to win. So one of the producers went to Mr. Cugat's hotel, and from Mr. Cugat's sworn testimony, this is what took place. Question: did one of the questions asked you on the show involve Cole Porter? Answer: yes. Question: do you remember a producer saying to you, of course, you know that at one time Cole Porter was a member of the French Foreign Legion, and you said you didn't know that? Answer: yes. Question: and then on the program, did they ask you whether you knew Mr. Cole Porter had once been a member of the Foreign Legion? Answer: yes.
And you have a chance, sir, of winning $16,000 and the championship. Now, do you know this composer who joined the French Foreign Legion?
Yes, the composer was Cole Porter.
You're right. Come on out. Say no more. You're the champion.
Why cheat in front of millions of people? Or was it cheating? In further testimony from Xavier Cugat, I knew it was not on the up and up, not when they told me the questions and answers. Question: so you went into this thing knowing that the show was fixed and you were participating as a routine performance of entertainment and there was no contest at all? Answer: I felt it was entertainment. What they wanted from me was a show. That is what I tried to give them. Question: it was entertainment as far as you were concerned, but as far as people watching the program were concerned, they were deceived, were they not? Answer: now I know that they were. These scenes of suspense were not all phony, but enough were so that everybody was embarrassed. These highly rated and cheap-to-produce broadcasts disappeared from prime time. The basic question raised by the quiz show scandal still persists. What is entertainment and what is information? And do you have to keep them apart? Yes, said the networks. Information is one thing, entertainment another. In a burst of virtue and conscience, the men who ran the networks canceled most quiz programs, tightened standards, and commissioned prime-time investigative documentaries. The news divisions were given more time and money for informational broadcasts. Only occasionally have documentaries drawn large audiences. What put the mass in the mass medium was entertainment. This is Rex Harrison recreating a Broadway rehearsal. Harrison, who had never sung a note on stage, had to try to be a singer. It's sort of backstage at My Fair Lady, and Rex and the orchestra were trying to, well, make friends with each other.
Doing whatever he thinks is best for him. Just an ordinary man. But there's a woman in your life. Stop! Take it out. I demand that be taken out.
Take out what?
That's ya-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. It's so loud. How do I know where to sing?
You'll get used to it, Rex.
I will never get used to it. It's absolutely ridiculous for a man to be standing up here saying his lines with a symphony orchestra blasting away down there.
What would you like to do, Rex?
I'd like to do it in a straight play. That's what I'd like to do.
Shall we go on?
Oh, yes, go on. But there's a woman in your life, and you're up against a wall. Make a plan and you will find she has something else in mind. And so rather than do either, you do something else that neither likes at all. Excuse me, excuse me. Do you think there might be a laugh there?
There will be, Rex.
Well, then, if there is, would you mind you and your chaps just waiting a minute?
Oh, we couldn't do that, Rex.
Why not? Make a plan and you will find she has something else in mind. And so rather than do either, you do something else that neither likes at all. And it's vaguely fun, isn't it?
It is, Rex. But once the music begins, it continues through to the end.
But that's absurd. Supposing the audience laughs and they miss the next line.
Rex, in the musical, the audience knows not to laugh into the next line.
You see, I don't believe you. Where did they learn that?
They just know. Let's take it from, they want to talk of Keats and Milton.
You want to talk of Keats or Milton? She only wants to talk of love. You go to see a play or ballet, and spend it searching for her glove. Or let a woman in your life, and you invite her to the strike, and they buy their wedding bands and the dances in the hands. I'd be equally as... What's happened? I thought I was doing beautifully.
You got ahead of us, Rex. We cannot play that fast.
Well, take out some notes. There's far too much going on down there. I can't hear myself think on this stage. Aren't you supposed to be following me? I'm not supposed to be following you.
Let's go through with it once, Rex.
No, I'm sorry. We'll have to come to some understanding about this, you know, otherwise the curtain will not go up tomorrow night.
Let's go on to the next section.
I sing this song on a balcony 4 miles from the orchestra pit, and when I'm up here all alone, I want to know that you're following me.
Shall we go on?
Yes, go on.
From the top of the next section?
From the top. I'm a very gentle man, even-tempered and good-natured, whom you never hear complain, who has the milk of human kindness by the quart in every vein, a patient man am I, down to my fingertips, the sort who never could, ever would, let an insulting remark escape his lips. Just a very gentle.
The year is 1949. Network TV has no legal birth certificate, but scholars usually say commercial television was born in that season. We've looked at hours of drama from this early period. Very few of those hours stand the test of time. But maybe we can recreate for you the fun of finding your way in something that had just been invented. Let's begin with the actors, a group of actors, the class of 50. We thought we'd show you some faces you couldn't believe ever looked that young. Recognize that man on the left? Well, that's Charlton Heston in a pretty good Studio One, for which he received the sum of $175, which included a couple of weeks of rehearsal. Heston had to figure out for himself how to act for television. Should he keep his actions small and controlled as a film actor does, or play for the last row as you do in a theater?
Why, we've only started on our road.
Frightening, isn't it?
Eric, come now. We're not children.
No. Oh, to say, is a child innocent? The child sees everything. The child forgets nothing, and the child forgives nothing. And someday, God help us, he should rise against us with his hate and his scorn and a knife in his hand.
A year later, 1950. There wasn't any money for scripts from established writers. Literary works were adapted by the producer himself, as Worthington Minor adapted dozens in a single year.
Hey, you look pretty bad.
That fellow with the sore tooth looking at himself in the mirror, that fellow is going to make $300 for 2 weeks' work. His name is Jack Lemmon.
59th Street. He fixed my sister up, and she's very sensitive.
Now, listen, you want to go to the best dentist in New York? Why, Dr. John Harrington, that's who. Hey, look, he put in those 2 fillings for me, and I thought I was in Roseland.
Gee, that sounds pretty good. I think I'll go up there now and get it over with.
Sure, he looks young. how did you look in the 1950s?
One thing for sure, whatever happened, she didn't get much of a break.
Yeah. What was golden about the golden age of television was its youth. Golden youth always assumes it can do anything, given enough love and opportunity. In 1950, this submarine was constructed laboriously in the Grand Central Studios of CBS, 4 floors above the New York Central tracks. The railroad ran below the submarine. The set cost an astonishing $14,000, and the producers violated the law that says good television is 80% close-up shots. The set was so cluttered, the camera couldn't get in for close-ups. Size, bigness, Hollywood dimensions. This was an experiment that live television would abandon. By the way, that fellow coming in with the tank is Walter Matthau, who got $70 for 2 lines. Here comes the first of his lines.
The last trip forward, room ain't without a mass food center. I'll get it heavier by the minute. Give me a hand hooking up these bottles.
Right, said Walter Matthau. That was the second of his 2 lines. It's 1952 now, and in 2 years, some important changes have taken place. There was only $700 for a writer, but there was, as agents like to say, a big piece of talent in the cast. It's not the lead, Dick Foran, but the young woman the camera is moving into. She has the profile of a princess. She'd just done a picture called High Noon, and she just had to be paid a respectable fee. Grace Kelly at $1,000, and she was only the 3rd lead.
Tell me, Freddie, you like it up here?
I like it anywhere you are.
That isn't what I asked you.
I love it here, Jeff. Is that better?
I'm serious.
Me too.
Tell me, you don't miss the next door neighbors, the movies, the store on the corner?
No.
When you're a 3rd lead and not the top star, you had to play scenes that maybe didn't come so easily for so aristocratic a person.
Hold your back. Get out of my way.
Get back!
We have to shoot you, too.
Go ahead, I expect you. Look at you, hunting him in a gang. Why don't you come after him one at a time?
You don't go after a crazy man one at a time. Come on, let's finish him now. What's holding you guys back?
I'll tell you, they're thinking maybe that you're screaming after Jeff's blood for nothing. They're thinking maybe he didn't do it.
Even as late as 1953, when this You Are There was done, The Death of Socrates, Hollywood held itself aloof from television. TV was for beginners, and here are 2 beginners. Robert Culp on the left, and Paul Newman, for $200, played Plato.
Citizen Plato, I wonder if you would...
Not right now, please.
Later that year, Paul Newman had a role that showed him off much better.
What's changed?
Those handsome looks, those little glints of masculinity and sexuality, would make him one of America's greatest leading men. In this scene with Diana Florey, the acting is a little, well, unrehearsed, but he'd get invaluable training in hours and hours of TV dramas.
But I can't give it to you in writing. You want to take a chance with me? Come on.
You can feel that this is a young man with a brilliant future about to leap on him.
But that plane leaves at 2:27, and I'm going to be on it. With you or without you. So make up your mind.
I can't think
Okay. I'll send you a postcard.
Second from the right is James Dean of The Generation to Come, and on the right is Walter Hampton of The Generation to Pass. Television was changing the art of acting.
You didn't notice that one of these fingers is worn through. Just enough to leave one fingerprint on that valve panel in the hall.
Dean's face foreshadows the rebellions of the 60s. But in the 50s, the rebels were looking for their cause. Young Americans would find in this face the hurts and angers that would boil over in the decade to come.
I don't know. What can I say?
There's this peculiar thing about actors and screens. The audience puts itself into the screen, pushes its own hopes and dreams into an actor's face.
And that would be telling the truth.
Yeah, well, there's a little more to it than that, Mr. Clemens. We had a fight. Her and me. She'll tell you about it. She probably already told you about it. I was all mixed up.
Not all live drama was exciting. By 1954, live nighttime network drama needed over 1,000 original scripts a year just to stay on the air. Shakespeare himself only wrote 100 good hours of drama in his whole lifetime. Mass meant mediocrity, but little bits of talent here and there peeked through. Joanne Woodward doing an ingenue, a little bit like June Allison, a little bit like the first face of Eve.
We did go to the theater the night I had in my diary. It wasn't for next night.
All right, honey. What difference does it
It
make?
means I'm not losing my mind.
Carol, how can you be sure about the night?
Why do you call me Carol?
Please, dear. How are you sure?
I found the ticket stubs in my pocket.
These scenes are from 12 Angry Men, written by Reginald Rose, directed by Franklin Schaffner. Live drama captured within 4 walls of a New York studio. By 1954, Hollywood, which had remained contemptuous of drama out of New York, Hollywood began to see that there was power and talent in these broadcasts. The television play was so good, the movies copied these live scenes almost exactly when they put them on film 3 years later. What the writer did was lock 12 jurors in a room and show how their private passions influenced their public decisions.
He heard a body fall. Now, just think about that for a minute. Do you think it's possible he could have heard this boy say, "I'm going to kill you," with an elevated train roaring past the end of his nose?
What do you mean? Sure he could have heard it.
He could?
He said the kid yelled it off. That's enough for me.
I don't think he could.
The best of live drama examined people under stress, went at human conflict. There wasn't much physical violence in live television. Physical combat wasn't easily staged. But there were incredible tensions. Tensions as taut and real as those in life.
Oh, wait a minute. The phrase was, "I'm going to kill you." And the kid shouted it out at the top of his lungs. Anybody says a thing like that the way he said it, they mean it. How they mean it?
You think he'd shout out a thing like that so the whole neighborhood would hear it? I don't think he would. He's too bright for that.
Bright? Why, he's nothing but a common ignorant slob. He don't even know how to speak English.
I'd like to change my vote to not guilty.
Unlike film shows, which were made start and stop, live television never had a take 2. You just went straight on, straight ahead. If there was a mistake, you just kept going. Live television drama was not only a show, but because it was live, it was an event. Like, say, today's football games or Broadway plays at their best. That bred a school of actors, the class of 50. But behind the camera, it taught a school of directors who would bring the world a technique that the British came to America to copy. What we thought we'd do with these scenes from Rod Serling's Requiem for a Heavyweight, directed by Ralph Nelson, is show you the technical problems that a director faced. 90 minutes with no take 2. Just watch it without the dialogue. See the artistry. Jack Palance and a lighted door over his shoulder. 2 people will come through the door, so the camera moves left to a quickly composed shot of 4 people. In a moment, the camera will move right to a mirror shot. Mirror shots are difficult because unless they're worked out carefully, you'll pick up something you don't want, like a reflection of a stagehand or another camera. Now the technical ballet continues. Cut to the camera on the left with the shadow in the door. The actors had to hit exact marks on the floor without looking down because in this low-key lighting, it was always possible they'd get their faces in shadow if they missed their marks. Keenan Wynn moves screen left, and the cameraman adjusts for him. The sound man had to be sensitive to every move because there was only one microphone boom, and each actor speaks at a different level. And the sound man had to adjust instantly for different voices. Hundreds of technical decisions like this, one after another, for 90 minutes. There never has been anything like this in television since the 50s. Maybe you'd like to see this scene with the sound in and everything going as it did then. This is where we began this sequence, with Jack Palance in profile and Keenan Wynn full face, and a lighted door that the camera will catch over his shoulder as it moves left. Soundtrack up.
Mace, don't make me.
What do you mean, don't make you? What, am I, your father or something, don't make you? You don't do anything you don't want to do. If you don't think you owe me, okay.
Hey, Mace, how about a couple of pictures? We ain't had any with the costume yet.
Pictures?
Oh,
all part of the build-up, kid. One picture's worth a million words. That's what the Greeks say. Hey, what do you want him out here in the hall?
Out in the hall, I think. We got more room.
So? What are you waiting for, Valet? Come on, let's hurry it up.
I'll be right there, Mr. Prelly.
McCarthy's on next. Let's go.
Mace, tell him to go away.
What do you mean, tell him to go away?
In 1957, when Playhouse 90 was in its first season, live television drama became something that the Broadway stage and the feature movies had to take seriously. It was no longer a question of selling properties or stars to television. The older arts began to learn something from this 8-year-old child. We think this is one of the greatest broadcasts of the 1950s.
The Miracle Worker by William Gibson. Directed by Arthur Penn. Produced by Martin Manulis.
This TV drama would later be a success on Broadway, a success on film. But it began live, no take-twos in 1957. We thought we'd show you the key scenes, but a word of explanation is necessary. The Miracle Worker is the story of Helen Keller, who at the age of 19 months lost her sight and her hearing. Later, she lost her ability to speak. The Keller family brought a special teacher, Anne Sullivan, into the house to try to find some way to communicate with a deaf, dumb, and blind child. Anne Sullivan tried to teach Helen Keller what a word was by a technique called fingerspelling. Here, she's trying to teach the word water in fingerspelling to Helen Keller.
W-A-T-E-R, water.
It was some sort of game the adults were playing with her. Helen Keller played the game with her dog. The young child's mind could not connect the word water with the feel of the liquid. And now the final scenes of the drama, live and uncut, as they appeared on the night of February 7th, 1957.
Grace. I don't know about that. An awful lot of things in the good book I wouldn't care to hear just before eating.
Well, fitting in the sense that Jacob's thigh was out of joint and so's out their lambs.
Oh, James. Claire, you... Special occasion. Now, Captain Keller?
We had a little talk, Cindy, and Miss Sullivan feels that if we indulge the child, that she'll...
Too old to throw things on the floor. But only in napkins. Now, sorry, Mrs. breakable. Oh, my. You was not in there. Say, my goodness, she's only a child. She's learned and she'll learn more.
All right. All right, I'll keep her to it, but not by sending her from the table. Now, bring her plate back. I won't see a child of mine deprived of food.
If she were a seeing child, none of you would put up with this.
Well, she's not, so bring her plate back. It's natural enough. Most of us don't like our teachers. Very well.
This lamb has a beautiful flavor, Miss Katie.
Where are you taking her?
Don't undo what I do. I treat her like a seeing child because I ask her to see. I expect her to see. She's going to fill this pitcher again.
We have servants to fetch water.
Don't interfere with me in any way.
Let her go.
What?
I said let her go. She's right. Yes, sir, she's right. And you're wrong.
No, she isn't here. Pump. Water. W-A-T-E
W-A-T-E-R, water. W-A-T-E-R, water. Whoa. Whoa. Yes. Yes, over Trellis. Brown. Mrs. Keller. Dad. Mrs. Keller. Mother. Yes. Oh, my. Yes. She knows. Teacher.
Live television is about to change the politics of this republic forever. It's the 1952 Republican Convention. The networks spent $10 million to cover the conventions. The original idea was that TV was just a kind of window through which the American people would watch politicians at work. What nobody understood was that TV would come right through the window and start rearranging the furniture. The Republicans this year looked like they'd nominate for president Robert Taft of Ohio, who had control of the party machinery. They went about their political family affairs as if TV weren't there. Just for that reason, you're going to see something that has never happened since. A couple of leading Republicans are really going to get mad at each other. But this fight was in front of the whole nation.
From that the motion isn't an agreement. We were supposed to have a caucus here. We were supposed to have a caucus of 45 minutes.
That's Governor Fine of Pennsylvania arguing there with the temporary chairman.
I don't care. Listen, we're going to have a caucus in 45 minutes.
What happened was that TV watchers decided to tell the Republican Party that they liked Ike better than they liked Taft. TV turned the convention inside out. And when it was all over, Taft on the right, trying so hard to smile, had lost to Ike on the left. And the politicians were beginning to discover that whatever plans they had for elections, they'd better make plans about how to handle television. There was a young man in the California delegation named Richard Nixon. He became Ike's running mate. One of Richard Nixon's earliest uses of live television deserves a moment. There was a scandal concerning a secret fund which Nixon had obtained, and Eisenhower wasn't sure Nixon was trustworthy. This famous checkers speech of Richard Nixon was supposedly for the American public, but it was really to convince Ike not to dump the vice presidential candidate.
That's what we have, and that's what we owe. It isn't very much, But Pat and I have the satisfaction that every dime that we've got is honestly ours. I should say this, that Pat doesn't have a mink coat, but she does have a respectable Republican cloth coat. And I always tell her that she'd look good in anything. One other thing I probably should tell you, because if I don't, they'll probably be saying this about me, too. We did get something, a gift, after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our two youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it.
The 1956 Democratic Convention, which would nominate Adlai Stevenson, who'd lose for a second time to Eisenhower. There's an obscure moment here that showed the political power of TV to make instant candidates. A young man from Massachusetts named Kennedy was put up for the vice presidency. He lost, but his concession speech was so gracious that the word charisma came out of the dictionary, and politicians for years would model themselves on this stylish young man.
I hope that this convention will make Estes Kefauver's nomination unanimous.
By 1960, the political power of TV was half understood. Kennedy used it best, which means he spent the most money on TV of anybody in the Democratic primaries. He bought and bought TV time as part of his campaign. His most serious opponent was Hubert Humphrey, who got knocked out by a Kennedy TV blitz in West Virginia. And Mr. Humphrey said something that has haunted television executives and government officials and politicians ever since.
And it doesn't make you feel very happy when you end up, when the man walks into your room at 5:30 in the morning and says, Senator, we're in debt $18,000 and we have no more money for anything. No money for television, no money for printing. I say, where are the buttons? We have no money. So I say, all right, we'll just knock off the whole day, cancel out the program, and we'll get on this telephone. I'll call my friends in Minnesota. We'll call them in New York. We'll call them in Washington. We've got to raise the money. I can't go without it. The bus company wants the money. The television won't even let you get close without the money.
The first great debate between presidential candidates took place in a Chicago studio in 1960. It's generally conceded that Kennedy won the debate not on the issues presented, but because Americans saw something in Richard Nixon's face that troubled them.
Security of the United States, but as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
So in January of 1961, America changed. The outgoing president was Eisenhower, who had presided over the calm years of the mid-50s when television was young and a popular program was Father Knows Best. The incoming president was John Kennedy, whose 1,000-day rule would be an ominous precursor of the whole decade of the 60s, brilliant, rich, haunted by violence. Neither America nor television was young and innocent when John Kennedy took over. For one thing, the technology of television had changed. Nothing would be live again except special events. Primetime network television would be almost all edited on film or tape, with one exception: sports. We've said nothing about sports until now because sports weren't important TV in the 1950s. Until replay came along, sports could not be looked at closely. Yet there was one moment, one glorious moment we found when replay would mean nothing. It was 2:30 of a 1956 World Series afternoon in New York. The Dodgers playing the Yankees. A Yankee pitcher named Don Larson, a late inning. It became very, very quiet in New York. For that one great moment in sports might arrive, the only triumph that calls sports fans to silence. A perfect game by a pitcher. No hits, no walks, no errors. Gil Hodges tags one. Mickey Mantle backhands a catch. The ninth inning of the World Series. Larson walks to the mound. Not a Dodger has reached first base. Carl Furillo. Hank Bauer catches Furillo's fly ball in right. That's one. Roy Campanella, the Dodger catcher. Ground ball to Billy Martin. Over to Collins at first. That's two. A pinch hitter, Dale Mitchell, batting for Magley. Strike one. Strike two. Strike three. The perfect game. No one has ever done it in World Series history, not before or since. Not a man reached first base. At 3:07 on a Thursday afternoon in October, perfection came to television. When television was young.
Orders that his hair is dyed. George! Buck up, George.
Not very long ago, our good friend Milton Berle said, both Bishop Keene and I use old material.
And she really puts the stuff in her song.
This is Eric Silveride. Good night.
This is Douglas Edwards saying good night.
This is Robert Trout. Good night.
Good night,
And good luck.
What sort of a day was it? A day like all days, filled with those events which alter and illuminate our time.